So I started watching this Matt Dillahunty versus Ray Comfort debate, and I gotta tell you, I still got about half hour, maybe 20 minutes left, but I had to stop and start talking about it. I'm chuckling to myself. Why? Because it's fun to watch. As I might have expected, what's starting to come up is you were never a real Christian, Matt. Oh, you would have repented. You're never a real Christian, Matt. How's that? That's pretty decent. Actually, wasn't bad. I worked on a little. It was started out terrible. You were never a real Christian, Matt. Oh, you would have repented of your sins. So basically, there's two ways you can drive in. Why I'm getting a kick out of it is there's two ways you can drive an atheist up the wall, drive them stark raving mad, make their head explode. One, you were never a real Christian. And two. And two, Romans 1:20. You really do believe in God, Matt. You're just hiding it from yourself. You really do believe in God, Matt. Obviously you believe in God because God is real and God has spoken to your heart. You're just suppressing the information from yourself. You have your heart seared with a hot iron. Now it's really kind of fun to watch because Matt Dillahunty doesn't really take too well to those two. Most atheists really hate those two. But Matt Dillahunty really hates those two, and it's really kind of entertaining to watch him, totally get him. Now, I then went and watched some of there's an after party on some channel I watched where Shannon shows up. And it was really interesting because some guy called Smoky Salt and Light or something like that, and Shannon started having a discussion. Now, what's funny about it, this guy starts having a discussion with Shannon about, why does Matt get so upset when someone says to him, you were never really a Christian, or you really do believe in God. I get why it's somewhat exasperating, okay? I kind of understand why it's exasperating, but here's where Shannon had said it in the discussion. Now, Shannon says it's exasperating or something thereabouts, but she says it as a matter of fact. As a matter of fact, it's exasperating. Her head doesn't explode and she's going to fall apart. And, she doesn't have these absurd melodramatic gyrations. It's kind of normal. Okay, so what am I trying to say? There are two main things that Ray Comfort does rather than debate. One is, rather than actually have a debate with Matt, is say to him, you were never a real Christian. And the other one is you actually do know God exists, as it says in Romans 1:20. Now, both of those things, atheists get really, really, really upset if you do that to them. Now, I kind of understand it in the context of a personal conversation. Okay? And that's, I guess, what Shannon was getting at. I don't know. Shannon started having an interesting conversation with this guy, and they were on this subject. The guy was saying that Matt Dillahunty gets too upset about it. He takes it too personally. It looks like he's ginning it up for effect. That he's having a spaz attack about it on purpose to kind of rule speculation off limits. Normally I'm really good at catching people at stuff like that when they're doing something for effect so they can put one over on you. And I don't really think that's what he's doing. I think he's genuinely having a cow. Genuinely having a cow in the moment. Why he's having a cow is the interesting question. Again, I'm not sure. I'm not sure why he takes that so personally, why he gets so upset. And I don't remember actually which one he had the bigger cow over. So if you say to somebody, you were never a real Christian. I get why it's, the one that they were talking about was you really do believe in God, Matt. You're just suppressing the information from yourself. That's from Romans 1:20, The invisible things of God are clearly seen, being evidenced by the things that are, so that men are without excuse, or something thereabouts. Okay, everybody understands the scripture, right? If you don't, go to Romans 1:20, check it out. It's something like that. So in other words, the Bible is saying, and Ray Comfort is saying to Matt in the debate, you know there's a God deep down in your little heart of hearts. You're just suppressing the information from yourself. Now, why does Matt have a cow about that? That's what Shannon and this guy were discussing. And that guy said he was having a cow about that for effect. I don't think he's doing it for effect, but I'm not sure why he's having a cow about it. Why? I mean, it's perfectly legitimate. If I think that there's plenty of evidence about God, okay, I can kind of understand why people would have a cow about it in a one-on-one conversation. Because it's not really a conversation, it's just a way of saying, I'm right and you're wrong. Right? I mean, basically, I'm right and you're wrong, and deep down inside, you know I'm right. I guess that's why people get upset about it in a one-on-one conversation. So that makes sense. But why you get upset about it in a debate, where basically the whole point of a debate is to say to your opponent, I'm right, you're wrong, and deep down inside you know it, is kind of par for the course of a debate. And why people don't take it, okay, so here's the thing with Shannon, and here's the thing with most atheists. It's very related to some of the stuff I've been talking about. Now, most atheists want to present themselves and see themselves as kind of a neutral, disinterested third party. Someone who is just looking at the facts and trying to predicate what they believe on the available information. You give me the evidence, and I'll believe in your God. I'll believe in your Sky Fairy Craig as soon as you provide the evidence for it. So they're presenting themselves as a disinterested third party, correct? Correct. In the case of Shannon, it's somewhat plausible. Why? Because she kind of acts like a disinterested third party. She's not having a cow. If you go, Shannon, you actually really do believe in God. I've never seen her go, ah, and her head explodes and she starts like Matt does. Now, granted, it could be a personality thing. That's just, not the most patient person in the world. But why does it seems like his head legitimately explodes? That's the part that I'm getting at. That's the part that's worth analyzing. Because I don't think he's ginning it up for effect. This guy seemed to think he was. Shannon saying that he wasn't. And Shannon saying it is exasperating. No. It is obnoxious. No. And the guy was kind of like, okay, yeah. And then on the channel I was watching, then the guy cut them off and stopped what was, I thought, a really interesting conversation. I wish they had gone on for 20 more minutes. Because it looked like they were going to get somewhere. Why does an atheist's head explode when you say you really do believe in God? You're just suppressing the information from yourself. That's basically the argument in the Bible. You really do believe in God. Deep down in your little heart of hearts, you know there's a God. But you are just hiding the information from yourself. Now, that's not accusing you of lying. Some Christians spin that like that. It's saying to you, if you are not clearly perceiving what you actually believe, you are not deluding yourself, but suppressing the information that's easily available to your senses. How would you know you were doing it? You wouldn't. I mean, I guess some Christians spin it as you're lying. I don't. I wouldn't say that I'm not sure if I understand why an atheist would go, I really do not believe in God, thanks. The question is, why all the melodrama? Why have a cow about it? Why not say, I really do not believe in God? When something seems obvious to somebody, and not to the person you're talking to, it's kind of par for the course to guess at what's actually going on. Now, if you're an atheist, you think, when I say I believe in God, you believe that I believe in God, right? But you think I'm wrong, correct? Okay, do you just kind of accept that? Or do you kind of think that deep down inside, I might know that there's not a God and I'm just not willing to admit it? Have you speculated openly along those lines? Because I know some atheists have. Have you? You might not have, but why would I think you wouldn't? In other words, let's take it out of our realm and let's deal with the flat earther. Flat earther believes that the earth is flat, correct? Do they honestly believe that the earth is flat? That's the question. How could they possibly believe that? I get that our little bone of contention between me and you, the atheist, isn't quite as cut and dry as that. It's a little bit less available to the senses than that. But there are people out there known as flat earthers. Now, atheists always insist that belief is a choice. No, it isn't. No, it isn't. How you process information and what information, more importantly, you choose to process and decide this is the most relevant data that I'm going to focus on is entirely is entirely a choice. It might not be a conscious choice, but you choose it. If belief weren't a choice, then the flat earther is not only sincere in his belief, but he's right. He has no choice. Obviously, there's agency involved in a flat earther, is my only point. Obviously, there's some agency involved. And that forever proves that. So stop saying that belief is not a choice. There's agency involved somewhere along the way. Both what information to rule in and what information to rule out as relevant. This is what I was trying to get at. Beliefs are complex and they're built on substructures and superstructures of things that are deeply ingrained inside of you that you barely perceive. So, belief is, so there's a logical predicate for the things you believe, and then there's the emotional resonance. The emotional resonance is the whole story. And that's 100% unequivocally choice involved in that, agency involved. If there were no agency involved, there would be no such thing as a flat earther. That is somewhat under their control. They have the same information available to them that all the rest of us have. And somewhere inside of themselves, they are making a decision. Not necessarily on a conscious decision, but somewhere deep down inside, in their heart of hearts, they are making a decision to look at this set of facts versus those set of facts. Correct? Now, it's perfectly normal to speculate as to why. In the case of the flat earthers, I've never really talked to them. I've never really looked at what they say, so I don't even go there. But there's some form of psychological payoff, correct? There's some form of reason why they're doing it. It's not just, oh, they believe that, they got no choice. And obviously, the world is flat or they wouldn't believe it. That's kind of half the argument of an atheist. Obviously, there isn't a God. Why? Because I don't perceive one, therefore there can't be one. Doesn't work like that. I don't perceive one, Greg. Okay, therefore there can't be one. Now, when Christians argue, you kind of do perceive one. And that's an argument based out of the Bible. I get why you don't accept the argument, but why I have a cow about it, I'm not sure. But that argument is a little bit better than you might think. Because if you actually look back on your life, now I'm not arguing it right now, but if I were to argue it for argument's sake, it's entirely possible that you have had some evidence of some interactions with God in your actual lived life that you've rationalized away. When I became a Christian, I looked back on the life that I lived, and I said to myself, so in other words, it's perfectly, if you said for argument's sake right now, let's just say for argument's sake there is a God, and look back over your life, you could easily go, if there is a God, that was God. If there is a God, that was God. If there is a God, that too was God. Matt seems to argue that the default position is atheism. I strongly disagree. And I think the history of the world bears it out. If the default position was atheism, you would look back through the history of the world and you would see, at least half the cultures were atheistic as opposed to none of the cultures. None, a single one. No such thing as atheism in the ancient world, as far as I know. I've never heard of it. There may have been random people here and there who could be plausibly argued, yeah, that guy was an atheist. But there's no such thing as an atheist culture until very recently. If it were the default position, you'd see plenty of such things as atheist cultures. So it seems to be theism is the default position. Now, even in the lives of atheists, for example, there's a German atheist, Rene, who a lot of you know, okay? Prior to him becoming an atheist and adopting consciously the atheist position. So the atheist position is a conscious choice. I get you don't think there's enough evidence. I'm not saying you're wrong or right. I'm just saying there's some amount of agency involved. You are consciously choosing. Prior to him actually adopting that as his position, he had an experience when he was 7, 8 years old that he's talked about in his blogs and with some depth, and he's talked about to me. Is what a lot of people call the numinous experience, where he has this experience. Now, this experience is common to people all over the world, all across the globe, cross-cultural, common, everyday thing. It's sort of like, for lack of a better description, you start, thinking about, you get this overwhelming sense of, the profundity of life or the awesomeness of life and the mystery or something like that. And most people consider it a spiritual experience. Now, if you got no particular dog in the fight, which he didn't have when he was age 7, almost every single person who has that experience, it goes, that was God. Including my sister. My sister's a Christian now because she came out to California and saw the transformation in me after I became a Christian. But when she had her quote-unquote religious experience or numinous experience, she wasn't a Christian. I've explained it in some of my past videos. So she was sitting on a beach one day and her first son had just been born. And she had this overwhelming feeling of like, I don't even know, just one of the key things. You can Google these experiences, okay? There's a scientific, they've been studied. That's why I keep saying science on my side. They've been studied, they're cross-culture, and they happen all over the globe. It's called a spiritual experience or a numinous experience, and there are generally 8 agreed upon criteria that make it one of these mystical type experiences. One of the agreed upon criteria is ineffable, hard to put into words, hard to explain. So she said, her words, prior to her being a Christian, prior to her choosing a religion, she sat on a beach and said she had this overwhelming feeling of like peace and my life is really meaningful. Looking at her kid, it was a very emotional thing because it's very tied. It was tied into her just giving birth. And she said, I was put here for a reason or something like that. It's a very common experience to human beings. I was put here for a reason. And it's, again, ineffable, hard to put into words, so hard to explain. Now, if you are not an atheist, when you have that experience, every single solitary person who has that experience goes, oh, that's probably God. That's the most natural thing to experience it as. Oh, that's God. Oh, weird. There is a God. Maybe there is a God. If you are an atheist and you have that experience, you rationalize it away. Now again, I'm not saying wrong or right. You could still be right. There isn't a God. You can still be right. We're right. There's no sky fairy. You could still be right. There isn't a God. But the default position and the most natural thing on earth is to, when people have those experiences, to go, okay, that was God. I had a few of them before I became a Christian. I've explained them in some of my videos. One was in Westminster Abbey. Another one when I was in Italy. There's brain chemistry involved, so you could be tripping out on your brain chemistry to a certain degree. And religious iconography is generally designed to speak to that feeling. Religious iconography and religious stories and myths and rituals and parables are generally designed around those type of experiences. As I said, they are ineffable. They are hard to put into words. So people come up with rituals. They ritualize those experiences. That's how they start trying to translate them into actual concrete reality. Because they don't translate into the world of the A equals A, 2 plus 2 equals 4. I'm kind of rambling a little. Where am I going with this? It is kind of normal. Now, maybe Ray does it in a way that's a little bit too awkward and you hardened your heart, Matt. You hardened your heart towards God, and now you're looking for excuses. I'm pretty impressed with my Ray Comfort, I gotta say. I really am. I think that's pretty good Ray Comfort. You hardened your heart, Matt. You hardened your heart, and now you're looking for excuses. You're looking to not believe. Well, the judge paid you fine when you were going, you didn't even know there was a speed limit in the area, and you got pulled over, and the judge paid you fine. I think that's darn good, but all right, so I'll stop patting myself on the back for my awesome Ray Comfort. Yeah, that was an awesome Ray Comfort. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I get it. I'm not saying it all that well this morning. I'm not operating on all 5 cylinders. I basically just woke up. Is it possible that Matt is quote unquote hardening his heart and suppressing what he knows to be the case? Maybe. There's no way we would know. I'm not accusing Matt of lying. There's no way he would know if he were doing it, correct? Right. I'm not accusing the lying. But to have a cow, if somebody says that to you, just doesn't seem like the appropriate response. To go, I don't think so, like a rational person, as a rationalist is supposed to be. See, in other words, Shannon Q is much closer in spirit to what atheists say they are. A disinterested third party who's saying, just show me the facts. So if you say to Shannon, you're just suppressing the information from yourself. You know deep down inside yourself is a God. She'll go, maybe, I don't really think so. Give me some evidence of that. Or how would I know that? She'd probably say that. How would I know that? She wouldn't go, wah, rah, and hang up on you if you're calling the atheist experience. That's what she wouldn't do. She wouldn't do what Matt does. Matt doesn't act like a disinterested third party. He acts like a, trigger warning. Don't say this to Matt Dillahunty. You do believe there's a God. He's going to go, rah. Why? Why is it taken so personally? Now, the one guy who was debating with Shannon said he's doing it for effect. He's having a spaz attack on purpose to manipulate us. I don't think so. I'm usually really good at smelling that type of stuff out. It doesn't feel like it to me. It feels authentic. Feels like maybe he's just not patient. It's just, Shannon did say it's obnoxious and annoying. So I get it, that's why I never do it, because I get in the context of having a conversation with an actual living, breathing atheist right in front of you, that kind of shuts down the conversation. You do believe in God, atheist, you're just not admitting it. It's kind of, there's nowhere you can really go in a conversation. So that's why I don't do it. But all I'm trying to say is, think about it if you're an atheist. Think about it. Is it possible? Is it possible? And how would that be possible? Here's a way that it is possible. And let me see if I have time. I'll tell you the parable of the non-Spanish Spanish guy. The what? Yeah, it's parable of the non-Spanish Spanish guy. Okay, I got time. It is entirely possible to receive evidence and information, to receive it, and not actually pay any attention to it at all. And you, the conscious agent, know it, sort of, but just don't get it. In other words, here's the parable of the non-Spanish Spanish guy. When I used to work at Radio Shack, there was a guy named Al Valdez. Did you hear the last name? Valdez. That's a Spanish name, right? Okay, the whole time I worked with him about 4 or 5 years. Maybe, no, 3 years I think I worked with him. Whole time I worked with him, I knew his last name. Valdez, Spanish name. Never occurred to me that was a Spanish name, even though I knew the name. Sometimes you get information and you know it, you just don't process it. This is where I'm going with this. And if I don't say it all that well, it's early in the morning, I'm a little sloppy this morning, whatever. This is worth hearing. And, just for the Ray Comfort, it's a Ray Comfort invitation alone. This was a great video. That's a killer Ray Comfort invitation. It really is. It's fantastic. Yeah, I know, I'm all over the place. This is how I roll when I wake up in the morning. I'm blah, 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 disjointed. Okay, so the parable of the non-Spanish Spanish guy. I worked with this guy for 3 years. Now, he turned out, one day I found out that he was an immigrant. And my head exploded when I found it out. Why? Because I had processed him completely differently. Even though there was tons of evidence along the way that I just saw and knew, technically, but didn't factor in. So what I had done with him is put him in this sort of cognitive box. Because he fit. He went to UMass. He was kind of a computer nerd guy, kind of a loner. I liked him. I got along with him really well. He was a good guy. But he was kind of like a computer nerdy guy, somewhat of a loner. So I put him in a cognitive box. Oh, typical American. When I first met him, slacker, underachiever, smart, definitely smart guy. Again, I said I went to UMass. On his breaks, he'd go get comic books. He'd go read comic books in the bookstore across the way. When the store would empty out, he'd start playing World of Warcraft. That's what he'd do. He'd start playing World of Warcraft for like 2-3 hours, right? Okay, so you understand what type of person, what type of cognitive box I put him in. Typical American computer guy, underachiever, slacker. It wouldn't have surprised me. I forget if he said if he smoked weed a lot, but I would have said, yeah, smoked a lot of weed. I probably even could have picked out what music he listened to. So I put him in a cognitive box. And that cognitive box was a pretty good shortcut. What do they call that? A heuristic? Pretty good cognitive shortcut for how to process this human being. So I saw and heard all the evidence to the contrary. We had conversations. He said, I'm going to El Salvador on my Christmas break. And I'd have conversations about him going to El Salvador. And they never quite registered. I heard his last name, Valdez, Spanish name, never registered. Why? I had him in a cognitive box. I had adopted shortcuts for dealing with him, and when the things were contrary information, I just didn't process it. I technically knew the information. I just didn't process it. So if you looked at his face, brown hair, brown eyes, he looked kind of, if you were really looking at him closely, you could tell that he was, from South America to some degree. Plenty of evidence was being presented to me. One day I turn around and we're having a conversation with this guy, again, about going to El Salvador. And it occurs to me to ask him, known him for 3 years, why are you going to El Salvador, Al? It's like, dude, I'm an immigrant. I was born in El Salvador. Hello? It doesn't have a Spanish accent, because then I would have picked up on it. My head explodes. What? You are? What are you talking about? You're a typical American slacker kid. What do you mean you were born in El Salvador? There were other pieces of information that had been presented to me along the way. And they were, again, all of them pointed to the possibility that this guy was an immigrant. I heard the information. I even knew the information technically. I knew his last name the whole time. He's like, dude, Valdez. I was born in El Salvador. I'm an immigrant. I'm like, you're an immigrant? Because I had him in a box. Typical American slacker. I had him in a cognitive box with cognitive shortcuts. So the information that was contrary to my presupposition about him didn't quite penetrate. Not sure if I said that all that well, but you understand how I could technically know. That's how you can technically know something that you don't know, because you aren't actually processing. So if you look back on your life, and you could do this experiment right now, and go, if there was a God, did he show up in my life? And then work it out. If there was a God, that was God. There was a God, that was God. I had like 100 of those lined up prior to me becoming a Christian, where I could look back. If there's a God, that was definitely God. If there's a God, God definitely came through for me there. If there is a God, God definitely, had my back in that situation. I'm not saying that that's correct. I'm just saying that it's certainly a possibility to be entertained. That deep down inside you kind of sort of do know. Now, here's another piece of evidence in favor of that. And again, take it with a grain of salt. I'm not thinking all that clearly this morning. 1 minute left. All right, so 1 minute left. There's a book that I mentioned in the past, Survival in Auschwitz. Survival in Auschwitz is written by it's an awesome book. It's about, Italian Jew was put into Auschwitz. Atheist. In the book, tells you clearly, I'm an atheist. At one point, you ever hear the slogan, there's no atheist in a foxhole? Okay, here's it in real life, out of his own mouth. He's in a situation in Auschwitz where they're doing a selection. And he knows if they pick him, he's going to go to the gas chambers. He's been there long enough to know what that means. So they're having people march past a certain doctor, and the doctor's going this line or that line. And he knows if it goes to the left, you're going to the gas chamber. Starts praying. Atheist. Declared atheist, starts praying. Stops himself and goes, you know what? If there is a divine providence, I at this point, I reject it because it's how I got here. So I'm not gonna believe in God. I am consciously choosing not to believe. Now, no atheist listening to me would probably accept that you are on some level consciously choosing not to believe, because that's basically what Ray Comfort is arguing. Not arguing all that well, but arguing. But it seems far more likely that given how much more normal and how much more common theism was throughout the history of the world, and how that particular idea, if that's why they say there's no atheist in a foxhole. And I noticed myself doing this when I called myself an agnostic. I look back on my time as an agnostic, and there were plenty of times where I would go like, please, God, please don't let me live through this, please. Please, God, let me live through the night. Thousands of times when I was agnostic. But when push came to shove, it's the most normal thing in the world. Now, you might have another explanation for it. This doesn't have to be like some, complicated conversation. It could be a conditioned reflex, could be whatever. I'm just saying the evidence seems to suggest that the default position, whether there's God or not, that the default position is theism. Now, there's a lot of explanations for that where they talk about what is it? Ascribing agency was a survival mechanism, yada, yada, yada. So it's safer to see coincidences as the tiger. I forget what there's a whole series of explanations for that. But those could amount to a whole series of rationalizations. All I'm pointing out, an atheist in a situation in the foxhole becomes for a minute a theist, please God, then consciously chooses not to do it. Consciously stops himself and goes, no way, there's no way I'm going to roll with divine providence given where I stand. Now, his particular situation, it's somewhat understandable. If there there is a divine providence. He's praying from, keep in mind, he is praying from Auschwitz. He's being selected to be gassed. So he's praying not to be gassed. So if I were standing in that situation, I might reject divine providence too. Like, if there's a God, I want no freaking part of you, dude. None at all. Because if there is a God, then he's partially responsible for where that guy wound up. So, I get the consciously choosing. This guy talks about it in the book a lot. People who had religious beliefs did better. They did better. They had more easily emotional, better usage of deep intuitive emotional tools to survive. I don't know. Go read the book, figure it out for yourself. Yeah, it sounds far-fetched, Craig. No, swear to God, that's what he said. That's what he said in the book. He noticed that the religious people did a lot better in surviving that extraordinarily difficult circumstance. Why? Because they had tools of emotional resilience that were not available to people who didn't believe. So, yeah, I just gave you evidence in favor of atheism. It's a tool of emotional resilience, Craig. That's why it's been around so long, because it's, it helps us adapt to difficult circumstances. I just gave you some evidence that atheism is true. I'm not really going anywhere with this. I'm just kind of waking up and running my mouth off. So, work it out for yourself. Who won the debate? The theist. Duh. Duh. I don't know. I'll go into the debate in another video. So, that is all for now, kids. Mass has ended. Go in peace. Amen.